Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time it is, wherever you are, whoever you might happen to be, and welcome once again to No Nerd Caliber. This is a show in which we talk about the top things that we like within a given type of nerd fandom. Tonight, we're going to be talking about since I'm running the show solo tonight, top 6 favorite science fiction worlds from pretty much any media. We're doing that because this Thursday, in another one of our live shows, Full Fat Spoiler Chat, we will be talking about Dune, the 2021 movie, of course, that just dropped. You can watch it on HBO Max. You can go watch it in a theater, whatever you're comfortable with, and we'll be talking about it in depth in Full Fat Spoiler Chat. So, as the name implies, spoilers. So Arrakis is an amazing world, and that got us thinking, okay, well, what are some of our other favorite worlds? So, who am I? I'm Rodney Brown. I'm the editor-in-chief of Nerd Caliber, first-person shooter on Facebook as a cosplay photographer, Burley_adopter on Twitter, mostly as a cosplay journalist, doing a couple other things. In the chat tonight, we already have, if you're still with us, Sarah. You joined quite early, so welcome. JW Gaming Woodall, hi, welcome to the show. Dax the Master, hello, welcome to the show. And let me do a quick run around to see if we've got anybody in any of the other chats. For those people who are currently watching, or anybody who might decide that they are going to watch this later on, let me get our first promo out of the way, and that is, we're really looking to ratchet up the number of followers we have on Twitch. So if you have a Twitch account and you want to go to twitch.tv/nerdcaliber and follow us, we'd be really happy about that. So it's up on your screen right now, twitch.tv/nerdcaliber. So please go check it out if you've got a Twitch account and follow us. And maybe join us on that platform, because we're really looking to build that up. So, we're going to jump right into it. I have, like I said, 6. I'm going to try to get through them fairly quickly. And, oh, by the way, for those people who have been watching the show regularly, yes, this is a sweater, and yes, it is sweater weather here in coastal Massachusetts. Dang. It's not warm out there, and it's been drizzling and miserable all day. A place that is not like that is our first interesting science fiction world, and that is Madripoor from the general Madripoor stories, Tales of Madripoor and so on, by the science fiction author Robert Silverberg. This encompasses a slew of novels, 8 novels, 7 novels and 1 collection of stories, and short stories that go all the way back to the very early 1980s. And the latest collection of stories, Tales of Madripoor, was published in 2013. So Madripoor is a world that has been colonized primarily by humans, but a whole bunch of other alien species, very Star Wars-esque in that sense. The humans have colonized it many, many thousands of years in the past. This series of books, the story is set in mostly, many thousands of years after humans have colonized much of the galaxy. Madripoor is an enormous planet, much larger than Earth, but it's made of much less dense material, so the surface gravity is very close to 1G, like Earth. But because of its size, everything is kind of like bigger. So there are 3 primary continents on the planet. Alhanroel, I was going to screw that up for sure. Let's see, Alhanroel, Zimroel, and Suvrael. Alhanroel and Zimrael are kind of positioned and kind of in relation to each other like Europe and North America. And Suvrael is a southern continent in the southern hemisphere that is massive like the other two and very dry. Mostly desert, some steppe and scrub grass area. Because this world is so big, each of these continents is essentially as large as all of the landmass of Earth. Each separate continent. The relative position, like I said, are sort of like Earth's major continents, North America and Europe, and or South America and Africa. And so there is a narrower sea connecting them, and then a larger sea on the other side connecting them. The narrower ocean is wider than the Pacific is on Earth, and the larger ocean on the other side is as wide as if Earth was completely covered in water, circumnavigating the whole thing. So again, the planet is enormous. The largest geographic structure on the planet is Castle Mount. It's a castle that sticks up 30 miles, which puts it, according to Silverberg, it puts the top of it initially was in vacuum, was in space. And that doesn't make sense when you think about the highest level that people assume anything can live here on just Earth is 30 miles up, and there's assumed to be microbes up there in what's called the stratopause. And our technical definition of outer space doesn't hit until 50 miles up. And a world this big, even with Earth-like gravity, would have a much, much deeper stack of an atmosphere. But it's a 30-mile high mountain, no matter how you cut it. And at the top of that is the castle of one of the 4 rulers of the world. And so one of the more interesting things is the political situation and how it lays out in this world. The sort of face, the public appearance of the ruling of the planet is somebody called the Coronal. And he lives in the castle, and the castle always bears his name. So the first book is Lord Valentine's Castle. When the Coronal retires, he becomes the Pontifex, who actually runs the world, living in a labyrinth that's in a desert area of the primary first colonized continent, Alhanruel. And the Coronal's mother is named the Lady of Sleep and rules from an island in between the 2 continents and has the ability to sort of keep people morally aligned by sending them dreams. The Suvrael is the home of the King of Dreams, although it's technically more nightmares, because what he does, he punishes people who do wrong by sending them nightmares. So in that sense, the book is kind of a science fantasy, in that there are sorcerers, there's psychic abilities and so on, but most of what is portrayed as, at this point, essentially magic is very strongly hinted at as being based on technology so ancient that these people don't really understand it anymore. So the King of Dreams sends his nightmares because of where his castle or his residence is located on Suvrael and the things that are in the castle. So yeah, it is science fiction in the sense that it's an alien world. Spaceships still occasionally visit the world, although it's really out there. It's like at the edge of anything where anybody would care to visit. It has very few resources because it is, low density means there's, few mineral resources and so on. So, they're way off the beaten path and have been kind of ignored by most of the galactic civilization for thousands and thousands of years. So, fascinating world. The only reason it's not higher is that it's kind of like Silverberg went, well, what if Earth, but like really big? So he does an amazing job with describing the scale. That's one of the things that really grabs you in this book is just how well he describes the scale of this world that's much larger than Earth physically. But it's still kind of a lot like Earth in that the primary race on this planet is humans. And there is an indigenous race which obviously didn't like being colonized by the humans. Humans won, and they are confined to a reservation on Zimroel. Um, but the scale is amazing, and then everything is kind of just like, let's put people on this gigantic Earth. So it would have been, I think, even more high. It would have been higher on this list if there was also more interesting flora and fauna that were an important part of the world, and we'll get to some of those as the list progresses. So, number 2 on my list, this probably wouldn't have made it, and that's really surprising, probably be really surprising to some of you, if it wasn't for The Mandalorian. And that is Tatooine. And I'm sure there are people out there right now that are just going, oh my God, you wouldn't have put Tatooine on? Well, it's interesting in Star Wars and in Phantom Menace, but I didn't find it super fascinating. That's not true. In 1977, I found it amazingly fascinating. The idea of somebody coming out, of an underground dwelling, which, is historical and accurate to the region where they filmed in Tunisia, going all the way back to the Carthaginians. They built their houses into the desert sand for the cooling effects, and appears, to look at a gorgeous dual sun sunrise. Blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind in 1977. Now we've seen even more bizarre and interesting things since then, but I still have that, soft spot. However, it was also kind of a ripoff of Arrakis from Dune, and kind of a ripoff, in fact, I think even more so, not a ripoff, an homage, let's say, to both of those, to Edgar Rice Burroughs' version of Mars, Barsoom, in his Maid of Mars and Princess of Mars and all of those books. I kind of look at, like, even the names, Sarlacc, and, Mos Eisley, and, all of these things, really just said, okay, somebody's channeling his Edgar Rice Burroughs right now. But then when they expanded on that in The Mandalorian, with, the look at the Krayt Dragon and more interaction with the Sand People in or the Tusken Raiders, Sand People, whatever you want to call them, in a more interesting way, it jumped up on my list. It is a fascinating world. It's pretty well explored and laid out in the movies and in the expanded material. As an example, in The Mandalorian, they wind up going to Mos, what's his name? Pelgo, which is where they run into, I can't remember the name character, but the sheriff, who winds up with Boba Fett's armor. And Mos Pelgo is mentioned in a lot of the other, material, but it's not actually shown anywhere. And suddenly, boom, here's this other settlement, this other town on Tatooine. And so Tatooine is very, very interesting. I also love the fact that it wasn't called Tatooine even in the final shooting script. It wasn't until they got to Tunisia, and Lucas heard some Berber or Tuareg or whatever the particular language that was being used to describe some of the stuff in the area, some local landmarks and so on, that he heard this, I think it's Tatwa, and just went, oh, hey, all right, cool. I like that better than I'm going to Upatua, Utapau was the original name of the planet. So Tatooine works better. So yeah, it's a fascinating world, and made even more fascinating once they started really stretching it out in The Mandalorian. JW, once again, hi again, and hi back at you. All right. My number 4 pick That is not Halo. That is Ringworld, which was the inspiration for Halo, from the Larry Niven novel of the same name, and the many, many novels since then, both sequels and prequels. So Ringworld was the first time in any kind of fiction, as far as I know, that anybody explored the idea of a crafted place for people or beings to live. And the story itself is both a sort of a picaresque, journey story, going to and then exploring Ringworld itself. But it's also a much deeper, more fascinating story about generations-long interstellar politics and alien relations and so on. It's really an interesting and deep story, although it can be read as a pretty fun adventure at the surface level. Ringworld is a story of Louis Wu, who's celebrating his 200th birthday. This is set in the year 2850, so they have developed life extension biotechnologies that, 200 is not a big. He appears as a young man, or a man in the prime of his life, I guess I should say, who gets recruited by an alien called Nessus, who's a member of a race called the Pearson's Puppeteers, which, if you haven't seen what they are, go look them up. They're fascinating. All of this is set in Larry Niven's expanded, what's called the known space universe. And so the Pearson's Puppeteers are part of that, as are another member that has been recruited to go and explore this thing that the Puppeteers have discovered, this ring, crafted ring of living space that is essentially all the way around the circumference of roughly the orbit of the Earth. So the amount of living space on it is millions upon millions of times that of a single planet. And apparently whoever built it is no longer around. So in addition to Louis Wu, there's a member of the Kazin, a Kazinti named Speaker to Animals, and then another human, Tila Brown, who's brought along, and I don't want to get into the details of why any of them are important, but they're all very important for their own very reasons, or various reasons, to the mission and ultimately to the story. But the exploration of this world and what things would be like, there are, to create day and night cycles, because otherwise it would be constantly day and everything would be cooked. There are panels that orbit closer to the sun, say roughly Mercury's orbit, that when their shadows land on the ring world, they create an almost even day-night cycle. There are storms that, because of the ring spins to create a gravity, because it's not obviously thick enough to create its own gravity, so it spins to create a gravity, but because of the way these big shield walls that come up from the side of the ring world affect the motion of air, there are tornadoes or hurricanes that run horizontally through the air, and things like that. It's just fascinating exploration of what it would be like to live on something like this created world. And then again, the story, like I said, is just really amazing, and I don't want to ruin anything or give any spoilers, because it's pretty cool. It's a very interesting story. I don't know if cool is exactly the way I want to put it. But yeah, Ringworld by Larry Niven and all of its subsequent books. If you haven't read them, go read them. They're great science fiction. Almost any world he puts on here is fascinating, or puts into his known space series is fascinating. But Ringworld is the topper in my mind. Number 3 on my list, that is a shot from, I think it's roughly 9 minutes into the first episode of the anime Last Exile. The world is called Prester, and I remember when I decided that this was going on my list, I had to look it up because I don't remember anybody in the anime ever saying it. And as it turns out, it does have a name. It's Prester, and yes, nobody in the anime ever says it. The anime basically shows two nations on Prester, Anatare and Disith, that are involved in a pretty much continuous war. It is absolutely 100% a science fiction story, kind of a space opera science fiction story. It also is essentially a steampunk story. The vast majority of the technology represented in Prester by either the people of Anatare or Disith is roughly end of the 19th century into early 20th century. And the political systems are late feudal, imperial, like Great Britain, Imperial Russia, Imperial Germany, around that period, and so on. And it's fascinating. The technology alone is fascinating. But one of the things you find out when you start watching this series, and again, this is like 7 minutes in, and there's actually scenes like this 9 minutes or so in, is whenever they pan across like large panoramas of the background of where these people are traveling in their airships, you see things like this. These are sort of cliffs, but they're also propped up with what are clearly metal beam structures. And then there's, flat land, and then there's more cliffs, and they don't explain what that is at all. Eventually you find out what that is, but there's no explanation for most of the 24 episodes of this series what's going on and why this world looks like it does. The basic story is that there are two 15-year-old orphans who are flying around in the van ship, which is a two-person messenger and courier type airship, that was owned and crewed by their fathers, who disappeared trying to cross this storm that separates the territories of Anatare and Disith, called the Grand Stream. And Klaus Vakla and Lavi Head are the kids. They take on a mission to take a small child to a battleship, which are airships. They fly through the air. Which is, as it turns out, this battleship that is a freelance isn't the right word. It's not the word I'm looking for. Sort of a freebooter type battleship. The captain of it was in the Anatare Imperial Navy. He defected and stole this battleship, and it pretty much does whatever it wants. The ability to fly in this world is based on this material called Claudia, and these engines that use it, called Claudia units, that in the small ships like the van ships are pretty much not really monitored, and the people with the van ships are kind of left to their own. In the bigger ships, the warships that are like a cross between battleships and aircraft carriers, they're controlled by this group called the Guild. And the Guild has insanely advanced technology. So while you're looking at this and you're thinking, okay, well, it's sort of a weird steampunky kind of thing, and then you encounter the Guild, and the Guild has technology in which they can remotely retrieve these Claudia units from the larger ships to keep them safe. If in a battle a ship is damaged and it looks like it's about to explode or something, they will literally remotely call the Claudia unit out of the ship, and it bursts through the hull, and then of course the ship just drops, and they recall it to the nearest monitoring ship that the Guild uses. The guild has beam weapons. The guild's flying craft are, you know, way more advanced than the things that most of the people use. And so it's a really interesting, also social and political story about this guild, about the people who are affected by it, and about these two kids and how they get caught up in this whole thing. And I'm not going to give away the ending, but the ending cements it hard as a science fiction story. And it's different than what you can kind of guess if you're a science fiction fan what's going on when you look at that picture. But exactly how that plays out and, you know, the nature of it it's a wonderful surprise. It's a fantastic series. It's worth watching. I've watched it a couple of times in both Japanese with subtitles and in the original dub. The dub is pretty good. As usual, I prefer subtitles, but this is one case where I think they pretty much nailed the dub. So I would strongly recommend it if you're a fan of science fiction, you know, far advanced technology science fiction, but also wonderful steampunk, fantastically realized world, beautiful animation, beautiful character designs, and for a series that came out in 2011. Oh no, I'm sorry, 2003. The sequel came out in 2011. Sequel's awful. Don't bother watching it. For a series that came out in 2003, the integration of 2D anime and CG anime is the kind of stuff that you often don't even see these days. You know, X-Arm, Tesla Note, we're talking about you guys. When it does work these days, like Godzilla Singular Point, it's also fantastic. This, now, almost 20 years ago, and they nailed it. So, yeah, go watch it. It's fantastic. You'll love it if you like steampunk and science fiction and anime adventure and so on. This should not be anybody surprise to anybody, but I bet it's going to be a surprise that it's number 2 and not number 1. And that is, of course, Arrakis. Dune, as it is colloquially known in the books, named Dune, or with Dune in their title often. Arrakis is, of course, the primary planet in the stories around the books in Dune. And particularly Dune, the original book, takes place in almost entirely on Arrakis, and Arrakis is the only world that's, I would say, well developed. There are things that happen on at the beginning of the book on Caladan, which is the original fiefdom, the world that the Atreides family is controlling. And there's some on Giedi Prime, which is the Harkonnens' world. There's some on Seleucus Secundus, which is where the Sardaukar are trained. But almost all of it takes place on Arrakis, and it's the only world that is developed like it is. And boy, is it deeply developed. In the first book, amazingly so, and even more so in the next 2 books, you get to really understand what both the world Arrakis is and the people, the humans that have come to live on that world, the Fremen, the people inside the towns and the cities. There's really only one city on the planet, Arrakeen, which is where the ducal palace is for whoever is running it at the time, and all of the processing for the spice. If you haven't read the book and you haven't seen the movie yet, or the 1984 David Lynch version, or the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, read the book and or watch the Denis Villeneuve version that just came out. And so because of that, I don't want to go into what is so fascinating about the world, other than Frank Herbert clearly did his research on ecology, on geology, And then also on cultures, the mix of what would generally be considered, Near East, Middle East, and North African cultures. There's stuff in here that is clearly inspired by, Tunisian, Libyan, by Egyptian, by Saudi Arabian, by Persian cultures. It's brilliant and wonderful. Um, and at times, particularly when he's talking about things in the past, kind of satirical. Um, this is never brought up in. This isn't really a spoiler because it doesn't happen. It's never brought up in the movie, the current movie, or in the previous movie that I know of. But the primary religious text that generally everybody of a religious bent follows in this future world is a Bible, but it's called the Orange Catholic Bible. And that would mean nothing to you if you didn't study or know anything about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And if you do know about the Troubles in Northern Ireland, the name of something called the Orange Catholic Bible is pretty hilarious. But yeah, go look that up. Or actually, now I think of it for that matter, the history of Holland and the Reformation. But yeah, it's so there's some of that stuff which is really funny in the book and in the development of the overall galactic world in which Arrakis is set. But when it comes to actual worlds, Arrakis is absolutely the king of amazing world development. For decades, if not still, the top tier. So why isn't it my number one? Well, let me tell you about my number one. And unfortunately, this is the only image I could grab that was large enough to actually show anything from the book Death World by Harry Harrison. So Death World is a story, and this is him here, of Jason Denault. He's a professional gambler who actually does a really good job at it because he's really good at hiding the fact that he has somewhat erratic but pretty effective psychic abilities that can help him either predict or in some cases control the outcome of random chance. And he is on a world that has a lot of entertainment and gambling. There are, planetary government-run gambling casinos. He gets approached by this fairly forcefully intimidating guy named Kirk Pyrrhus, who turns out to be from a planet called Pyrrhus, to ask him to help him take the significant amount of money he already has and turn it into an insanely large amount of money. Denault agrees. He does it. The government-run casino pretty much has a clue that he's cheating somehow, but doesn't know how and is coming after him. So he asks to go back to Kirk Pyrrhus's planet, and Kirk tries really hard to dissuade him because it is the most deadly planet that's ever been conquered by or colonized by humans, because it hasn't been conquered. But he insists, so he winds up going to Pyrrhus, which has the nickname Death World. The world is in a stellar region where, prior to the formation of the planets, there were multiple supernovae in the area. So all of the planets in the solar system, and Pyrrhus in particular, is loaded with high on the periodic table heavy elements, including lots of radioactive elements. It's larger than Earth, slightly larger than Earth, because it's so full of so much denser material, it has a surface gravity of 2G, twice that of Earth. It has two moons that are larger than Earth's moon, both of them. So it has tidal forces which create earthquakes and volcanoes all the time. In the oceans, the tides rise and drop by 30 meters at a shot. And all of the life forms on the planet seem to be deadly to humans and out to get them. So when Denault gets there, he finds out that there was a reasonable sized group of colonies, and at this point the humans are mostly living in one city with really high, thick, strong walls around it, because everything outside those walls is trying to kill them, trying to get in and kill humans. And the story of what is doing that and why it's happening is a really interesting mystery that lays out. And again, I don't want to get into it because it would be a spoiler. But how the humans react to it and how they try to deal with it. Those humans that are left, I mean, it's a small city, so there are still thousands of humans left, but those humans who are left are essentially the toughest people in the galaxy. They have honed reaction times to be, way faster than most people. They are generally way stronger because they're on a planet with 2 Gs of gravity. They're just, they would be the most effective warriors you could possibly imagine. And Jason Denault takes it upon himself to try to figure out why this is happening before the final city, the last colony of humans, is wiped out, because it's gonna happen. There's no question. If he looks at their historical record, and it has been a losing battle with the life forms on this planet. Melinda Lopez, welcome to the show. So Death World's written by Harry Harrison. It had 2 sequels and then a short story that includes the main characters. The sequels are okay. They don't. The second one doesn't take place on Paris, so Jason Denault is a very interesting character, as is his girlfriend Meta and who's a Piran, and the other Pirans and so on. But it's Death World that makes this series. And so taking it off of Death World, it kind of made it less interesting. So I would highly recommend the first book, Death World. We talked a couple of weeks ago in our show about Elseworlds and alternate reality worlds, about Harry Harrison's The Hammer and the Cross. And, he's a great adventure writer. He's not going to win any literary awards, but if you're looking for a really cool adventure that has a really interesting mystery and fantastic world building, I would highly recommend Death World. And that's it, folks. That is my list of my six of my favorite science fiction worlds. There's so many others that could go in here. It's just ridiculous. The teaser at the beginning had Kashyyyk, the Wookiee homeworld, and Dagobah, both of which could have been here, as could have Hoth, although Hoth is kind of boring. I mean, it's a big pile of ice. And so many other worlds. I can't think of the name of the planet, but Ursula K. Le Guin's novella, The Word for World is Forest. Fascinating planet. But if you are interested in the idea of science fiction worlds, like I said, Thursday, full fat spoiler chat, we're going to be ripping apart Dune. Well, not ripping it apart, but analyzing Dune. What was good about it? What was bad about it? What worked? What didn't? Themes, tone, messages, how that compared to the movie and the book, so on. So 8 o'clock Thursday, check that out. Again, it'll be full of spoilers, so you got plenty of time to watch the movie if you haven't, or read the book if you haven't, or both. So we're going to be talking about the movie. And tomorrow night, of course, is our Nerd Week Live Nerd News Show. Again, plenty of topics already in the budget, in the roster. Some of them are controversial stuff, which has been coming up over the course of this past week, and stuff that was actually lingering from years ago. So, yeah, we'll see you tomorrow night, hopefully. In the meantime, if you get a chance, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/nerdcaliber. We'd love to have you as a patron. You can jump in at a mere $2, and all of the revenue goes to basically help us go to cons where we will get more content to put up on our YouTube channel, to put up on our website. Photo galleries from another anime convention in Westward Mass will be going up starting tomorrow. Videos from that will be going up sometime soon here on YouTube. Well, on YouTube for those of you who are on YouTube. And yeah, so we want to get to more cons, even more cons than we normally do as they're coming back now that, knock wood, things are easing up on the pandemic side. Maybe. Although the fact that my social media has, in the last 3 days, posted 3 people who got breakthrough cases of COVID, maybe not. But I'm hopeful. So, that said, for that reason and all sorts of other reasons, folks, as the weather gets cold, etc., stay safe, and we will see you at an upcoming show. Bye-bye.